Hi, this is Jackie Pack, and in this video, I'm going to talk about sex and porn addiction. What is it? What does treatment look like? As a CSAT or a certified sexual addiction therapist, I see sex addiction as an umbrella term covering many ways that sex addiction manifests. Under the umbrella of sex addiction, porn addiction is just one of the ways that sexual addiction can manifest. We know that not all sex addicts act out in the same way, and actually, there are many ways of acting out sexually. We also know that sex addicts can engage in more than one sexual behavior under the umbrella of sex addiction. All addiction is a source of distraction. Addiction is an illness of escape. It is used for emotional escape, whether it's a substance or a behavior. It's a coping mechanism that eventually becomes maladaptive. Although initially it does get us out of our heads and it does give us relief. Eventually, though, it starts causing severe problems in our lives. Or in other words, it works until it stops working. Addictions are about a lack of control, and that lack of control causes significant problems. So, does everyone who views porn eventually become addicted? No. Just like with alcohol, not everyone who enjoys a drink or even drinks too much from time to time will become an alcoholic. When we look at the numbers for alcohol dependence, around 11% of users cannot drink without it causing severe issues in their lives. And the same is true with porn. Some people may watch porn and enjoy porn, and viewing porn does not become an addiction, but for others, it does. Whether it's on a porn site or Instagram, TikTok, if you're using it for arousal and escape, it can be problematic. So if the majority of porn users don't get carried away in the search for porn's rewards or incentives, what determines exactly when they use it? Most people who use porn use it only every so often. Sometimes people seek out porn simply because it feels good to be in a state of sexual excitement. Sometimes they use it to be entertained or to be distracted from work or other activities. More often than perhaps assumed, people don't use it because it feels good, but because it makes them feel better, which is a subtle and important distinction. A Kinsey Institute survey found that 9% of people who view porn have unsuccessfully tried to stop. This survey was taken in 2002, and since then it's become much easier to access porn via the internet and streaming services. This easy access makes it more difficult to stop if watching porn has become problematic. Sex addiction or compulsive sexual behavior disorder is a dysfunctional preoccupation with sex that continues for at least 6 months despite negative consequences, and attempts to either quit or curtail the problem causing behaviors have been unsuccessful. Stated more simply, sex addiction is an ongoing, out-of-control pattern of sexual fantasies and behaviors that cause problems in a person's life. Porn addicts typically spend at least 11 or 12 hours per week searching for and looking at pornography. It's most often digital imagery accessed from their computer, laptop, tablet, smartphone, or some other internet-enabled device. And this 11 or 12 hours a week is the low end of the spectrum. Many porn addicts devote double or even triple that amount of time to their addiction. Sadly, porn addicts are often reluctant to seek help because they don't view their solo sexual behaviors as an underlying source of their unhappiness, or because they're too ashamed of these behaviors to talk about them, even in therapy. Unfortunately, the DSM-5 does not acknowledge sexual addiction. It's important to note that the DSM is only used in the United States. Outside of the US, clinicians use the ICD-11, the DSM's international equivalent. This makes it more difficult for therapists in the US to identify and treat compulsive sexual behaviors, and for clients to seek insurance-funded treatment. That said, compulsive sexual behavior disorders is included in the ICD-11. The diagnosis reads as follows. Compulsive sexual behavior disorder is characterized by a persistent pattern of failure to control intense, repetitive sexual impulses or urges, resulting in repetitive sexual behavior. Symptoms may include repetitive sexual activities becoming a central focus of the person's life to the point of neglecting health and personal care or other interests, activities, and responsibilities. Numerous unsuccessful efforts to significantly reduce repetitive sexual behavior and continued repetitive sexual behavior despite adverse consequences or deriving little or no satisfaction from it. The pattern of failure to control intense sexual impulses or urges and resulting repetitive sexual behavior is manifested over an extended period of time, i.e. 6 months or more, and causes marked distress or significant impairment in personal, family, social, educational, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. Distress that is entirely related to moral judgments and disapproval about sexual impulses, urges, or behaviors is not sufficient to meet this requirement. The DSM will likely implement a similar diagnosis within a few years. For now, however, we do not have an official sexual addiction diagnosis in the US. Because porn addiction is a complex issue, there isn't a quick fix that will get you into long-term sobriety, let alone long-term recovery. Treatment for sex addiction employs similar foundational strategies and techniques that prove effective in addressing alcoholism, drug addiction, or other types of addictions and eating disorders. Early in therapy sessions, the focus is on managing problematic behavior, education about what addiction is, what issues underlie addiction, and an emphasis on ensuring safety and stabilization. Also, early in treatment, the therapist confronts denial and addresses any crisis that brought the client into therapy. We're also examining what happens to each particular client when they relapse, and we're working on relapse prevention. All of this needs to happen in a safe, non-judgmental way. We also know that for a lot of sex addicts, their addiction is rooted in trauma, although dedicated trauma therapy is usually postponed until the client achieves a degree of sexual sobriety, emotional resilience, and social support. We tend to acknowledge when there is a trauma component, and we acknowledge that we will need to work on that later in treatment. In the context of treating sex addiction, individual therapy is often insufficient by itself. To achieve sexual sobriety and address the underlying issues, sex addicts typically require external support. This is where group therapy comes in, focusing on sexual addiction. It can prove incredibly valuable in this regard. Group therapy ideally comprises 6 to 10 individuals of the same gender, and this group dynamic helps clients to realize that their struggles are not unique, helps to reduce pervasive shame that often drives the behavior. I've had clients who attend groups tell me their experiences in groups, and particularly the connection they developed, was their first experience feeling that they mattered just as they are. Group therapy also provides a platform for confronting denial, discussing effective interventions, and coping mechanisms. Most importantly, it underscores the availability of guidance and support from various resources, especially from fellow recovering addicts. In our clinic, for clients who advance through the various levels of group work, they typically land in what we call our advanced recovery group, where we explore different topics like attachment, codependence, shame resilience, relationship skills. Again, it's crucial to remember that each sex addict poses a unique background and distinct sexual and romantic challenges. Consequently, a personalized approach tailored to the individual needs is necessary, always prioritizing client safety. Misconceptions and misinformation abound regarding sexual addiction, particularly concerning the definition of sexual sobriety. Some erroneously believe that clinicians impose their own personal, moral, or religious views on what constitutes healthy sexual behavior. Certified sex addiction therapists, or CSATs, however, do not adopt this approach. They don't seek to be the arbiters of sexual conduct. Instead, they emphasize a sex-positive stance and encourage all forms of sexual expression unless that has become obsessive, compulsive, and harmful. For CSATs, same-sex behaviors, fetishes, kinks, and all other legal and consensual sexual activities are acceptable, even within the context of recovering from sexual addiction. And any therapist suggesting otherwise is either misinformed or they're just being dishonest. Many wonder if they'll have to forego a healthy and fulfilling sex life forever. Fortunately, sexual sobriety does not equate to prolonged abstinence. CSATs define sexual sobriety as engaging in sexual activities in non-compulsive, non-problematic, and life-affirming ways, rather than advocating permanent celibacy or renouncing specific preferences. Recovery from most behavioral addictions does not require abstinence. And in fact, abstinence may be seen as an overcorrection when aiming for balanced, functional, and healthy recovery. The good news, and maybe the bad news if you like rigid rules, is that there's no cut and dried answer to this question. Every sex addict enters treatment with unique life history, a unique set of compulsive sexual behaviors that are causing problems, and a unique set of goals for the future. Based on these deeply individual factors, each person must create his or her own definition of sobriety. This means every sex addict's definition of sexual sobriety is unique. Sexual behaviors that are hugely problematic for one sexually addicted client might be perfectly fine for another. Recovering sex addicts working with their therapist will create what we call a sexual boundary plan. This defines sexual sobriety and guides their behavior in recovery. Once again, every sex addict is different with unique life history, personal goals, and specific sexual behaviors that create problems. As such, every sexual boundary plan is different. There is not a set definition of sexual sobriety, and there's no set formula for recovery. Conformity is not the goal. Living a healthy and fulfilling life is what matters. So let me talk for a minute about the therapist. For therapists, there shouldn't be a moral code guiding the lens in which they're working with clients. Meaning, therapists aren't looking at the issue for clients with their belief that all porn is good or all porn is bad. We shouldn't become part of the problem clients are working through by adding our biases or our moral or religious beliefs. Most clients come to therapy because there's something in their life that is causing a problem. Whether that's anxiety, depression, unresolved trauma, relationship issues, or pornography issues, or they're strongly encouraged by somebody in their life to come to therapy. So again, when we're looking at problematic sexual behavior, some of the top 3 things we're looking at is preoccupation, thoughts or obsessions about sex to the point where it becomes problematic. A loss of control over use. This means trying to quit or cut back and failing. Maybe spending hours amassing porn and then deleting it. And a few days or weeks later, you're back trying to collect it all again. Negative consequences. This looks like having problems in your life that are directly related to the porn use. This might be relationship issues, legal issues, a loss of interest in other real-world activities, trouble at work, failing school, and generally life starts falling apart and becoming unmanageable. It's not about how much or what you're watching. It's about what it's doing to your life. If you find this video helpful, you can comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Subscribing is free.